Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We're just going to give it one more minute for everyone to join before we get started. All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for Lifting as We Climb as a part of MOVA's Victim Rights Month commemoration. We are really excited to have Kishana Smith and Dr. Clarke-Mitchell from the Massachusetts Women of Color Network here with us today to present. My name is Brenna Chase. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Director of Communications and Training at MOVA. Before I pass it off to our presenters, I'll just run through some brief logistics. First and foremost, this is a Zoom webinar, so that means you cannot be seen or heard as audience members, but you should be able to see the presenters on the screen, the ASL interpreter, and the presentation. If you have any questions during the presentation, please use that Q&A function found at the bottom of your screen to ask them. We will save questions until the end, but we will get to them. We have ASL interpretation as well as cart captioning available during today's session. To view those closed captions, you can go down to the icon on the bottom of your Zoom screen and click on the little up arrow and then click Show Subtitle. If you're having any trouble seeing the ASL interpreters or closed captioners or have any other tech issues today, please feel free to use the chat function and message all panelists, and someone from our team will happily assist you. And with that, it is now my pleasure to welcome Kishana Smith and Dr. Clarke-Mitchell from the Massachusetts Women of Color Network. Thank you both for joining us today and being here with us.
Thank you, Brenna. Good morning, everyone. And again, thank you for being here this morning. I'm Kishana Smith. I'll get into a bit of my intro soon. But before we do anything else, I would like to share that this presentation is funded and made possible by MOVA. So that is the Massachusetts Office for Victim Assistance. On their screen, you'll see their websites and their handles. So if you don't already follow MOVA, please go ahead and do so. So today you are joining us for Lifting as We Climb. Massachusetts Women of Color Network, our values, reflections, and recommendations about culturally specific services. My name is Kishana Smith, she, her pronouns, and I'm joined by the wonderful Dr. Clarke-Mitchell. Today is April 26, 2023. So a bit about your first presenter. Again, I'm Kishana Smith, she, her pronouns. I am the executive director at the Massachusetts Women of Color Network. We have been in the movement since 2010, offering support resources for women of color in Massachusetts. So we support the leadership and sustainment of women of color working in the sexual and domestic violence movement in Massachusetts. We do so by offering training and technical assistance. We offer coaching and mentorship, member resources in the form of training and technical assistance funds, health and wellness funds. We also offer advocacy. I am a survivor leader. I openly share that I am a survivor of childhood sexual abuse and also an adult survivor of domestic violence. I've been in the field for 12 years. I hold a degree in business management with a concentration in nonprofit management. And Monday through Friday, until about 5 p.m., sometimes 6 p.m. on a Friday, I like to drive in silence so that I can hear my thoughts. So that's me, and I'm going to send it over to you, Dr. Jean.
Thank you, Kishana. I'm so excited to be here. Hello, everyone. This is so amazing. I am Dr. Clarke-Mitchell, and I use she, her for my pronouns. I've been in this work for almost 30 years, I would say, entering the field as a survivor with children entering a battered women's shelter in 1994. And at that time, I realized what women were doing for each other in the shelter and decided to leave my business career behind and become a counselor. So I started while I was in the shelter. I became a hotline volunteer and stayed with that organization, which is the Elizabeth Freeman Center in Western Mass, and worked my way to the clinical director. And after that, I moved on to be a professor of social work at Lesley University. But I stay in the movement, doing whatever I can, including being able to participate in this webinar today. I've been with Mass Women of Color Network for, I would say, approximately 9 years, and watched the growth, starting with a few women like yourself, like myself, just develop this organization into an incorporation that was started last year. So I was one of the co-founder along with Kishana as well. So I'm excited today to just impart what I can about how we work together in a cultural specific way to get the work that we're doing done. So I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jean. And as you mentioned, although we've been doing this work since 2010, we are a brand new 501c3 as of last year. So we're still in our first year of being a 501c3 and operating with the board of directors. We also have a circular structure in terms of how we lead and how we work together to bring forth services for women of color. And so Dr. Jean is a part of our board and also the co-chair of our training and technical assistance circle. So in the upcoming years, you will see us do trainings in a circle model. Sometimes you'll see myself and Dr. Jean. You may also see others such as Shamika Gregory from Transition House and other wonderful individuals who are on our training and technical assistance circle. So our objectives for this presentation. So we'll be together approximately an hour and a half. And for that time, the hope is that we will understand the importance of culturally specific services, build upon our previous knowledge, increase your preparedness for engaging in culturally specific services. We encourage self-reflection throughout the presentation and also days after, and also take care of yourself. There are no built-in breaks. So if you need water, if you need the restroom, please feel free to do so throughout. Also, are there any intentions that you have for yourself throughout this next hour and a half? I encourage us to take some deep breaths. So we're going to take 3 deep breaths. So you're going to inhale, hold it at the top for what feels comfortable, and then exhale through the mouth or nose, whatever feels comfortable. We're going to do 3 of those. And then after, I would like us to sit for a moment and see if there are any other intentions that we have for ourselves, such as you may be working on creating culturally specific services. So maybe an intention is to ask some questions that you have, or to take notes on any of the things that we share today. So let's do those deep breaths. I'll start. That's 1. 2, and our last one. Thank you. So again, if there are any intentions that you'd like to set, please do so now before we begin the training. Also, it's 10:11. Many of you were probably just commuting or doing different things before this moment. So take some time to ground yourself to the space and allow yourself to be present. All right. So now we have these really cute photos. The first one is a photo of elephants. We see the bigger elephant in the front and elephants of all different sizes in a line. They could be a family, they could be friends, they could be traveling somewhere. Also, we have a photo of penguins. It looks like the penguins are in a group and there is one penguin in front of that group, could be talking to the group, offering direction, encouragement, who knows? But as we look at both of these photos, I want us to think about how we view leadership and what bias we hold about what leadership should look like. For example, with the elephants, it looks like the bigger elephant is leading the line, could be the more experienced elephant, could be the one that has done the journey before, and looks like the baby ones and the other ones are just sprinkled throughout the line. Also with the penguins, it looks like maybe the person given order and instruction is talking to the group and the rest of the group is listening. Oftentimes this mimics what leadership looks like. You know, a top-down hierarchical view where someone is at the top and talking to others within their group. And so as we sit with both of these photos, I want us to kind of think of, what does leadership look like in your organization? What do you believe leadership should look like? As we engage in this presentation today, I encourage us to do away with some of the biases that we hold. For example, with the elephant, maybe it's the middle elephant that maybe hasn't done the journey as many times as the one leading right now, but could do the journey pretty well, could lead the line pretty well. And with the penguins, maybe those penguins in the group, maybe someone has an opinion or an idea. However, they're so muffled and kind of jumbled together that maybe they feel shy to share their opinion. So they just defer to listening to the person that's doing the talking in the front. So again, want to encourage you to undo bias about what leadership should look like. And I'll send it over to you, Dr. Jean, to share.
Yes, thank you. I just have to take myself off mute. Okay. All right. So thank you, Kishana. Just kind of explaining that about leadership and what we think of, what we've been taught. And so we tend to do things that way, and we have to unlearn that, deconstruct that, so we're all recognize that we have value. So Mass Women of Color, as we're incorporating, we spend a lot of time thinking about the values that we have, how we want to do this work, how we want to include you and others in this work. And so our first value is to be create authentic connections. And when we think of authentic connections, we're thinking of connections where you feel that you're a part of, that you feel that you're not told lies, that you're not, things are not veneered over, that you are working with someone who has your best interests, and you want to impart that. Value number 2 is imparting history and knowledge. Many of us come into the field knowing that we have had abuse in our lives. We've been traumatized in some way, shape, or form, but we don't know all of the history. We don't know that going back maybe to the early part of the century, that survivors of difference, diversity that we bring was not paid attention to. We weren't valued when we put together the services that we wanted to have fund. We weren't thinking about many of us when that was done. So we have to let you know about the history and knowledge of the movement and what it can do for you, and continue to, in other words, help the people that you work with. Value number 3 talks about storytelling. And when we think about storytelling, we think of many of the people who are diverse listen to a story that doesn't include them. And the other thing is that we have storytelling in a way that we're very oral people of difference, people from cultures that are cultivistic versus individualistic. We are oral. We like to tell stories. We like to, and that has not been valued. If you can't write so much, if you can't document things, it's not as valuable in our culture. And we want to dismantle that. Yeah. Number 4 value is lifting as we climb. And that's a very important value and necessary value that we have, because we continue to want to do more, we want to do better, we want to develop, we want to grow. But as we do that, we also have to remember the people behind us. So for instance, for myself, coming to the shelter, taking the hotline training and beginning to develop myself, there's always people behind me that I'm thinking of. This is the way you do it. So you go to the shelter, your life isn't over. You can build a new life. You can get services, the things that that can help you and your children to grow. And so we have to always remember to look back in some way and give back in some way. 5 is sharing power. Kishana spoke earlier about how we do it at Mass Women of Color. We do things in circles. So the leadership committee, yes, we had co-chairs, but it wasn't administered in a way that you feel that just because you are a networker, you don't have value, you don't have wisdom, you can't impart that. We had our yearly conferences, we have our quarterly meetings, and we're open to every person's voice. So in sharing, we want you to recognize that sharing power, we can get more done, not the way that it's been done in the dominant culture. Community building, collaborating with others, working together, figuring out ways that we can apply for grants or do things together that is going to help everyone, not just each one of us, or not just one organization, but all of us. Community care is very important to Mass Women of Color, and we've developed ways to help people recognize that caring for themselves and caring for community is an act of resistance. So we provide whatever supports on a yearly basis we can to our network and to each other to continue to sustain ourselves, so we can sustain our community and find ways to give into our community, give back to our community. Fostering and encouraging thriving. Again, like I said, Kishana said it earlier, one of the main focus mission of Mass Women of Color is to help the network members grow, develop. So even though I might be a board member, I'm still learning from other people within that board or throughout the organization about things that's going to help me develop and thrive. If it's as simple as taking care of yourself so that you can feel better, so you can do the work, so you can continue to think, that's thriving, that's doing better than where you started. So we foster and encourage that at all levels. Radical self-preservation. When we think of radical self-preservation, radical self-care, finding ways to keep us going because we're helping each other and we're helping others coming into the field. So if we don't take care of ourselves in a way that's not selfish, but in a way that's, okay, if I do for me and I take care of me, I can help maybe 10, 15, 20, I don't know, the world. We can help others. So we need to constantly thinking about how we're taking care of ourselves and recognize that as a resistance to what goes on in the dominant culture against us. And last but not least, collective liberation. And most of all, importantly, because if we don't feel free, if we don't feel like we have a collective a team of people or group of people doing the work, and that they have that sense that we can move ahead, we can do what we need to do, it won't work. So that value of collective liberation is important, and we encourage that on as many levels as possible. So that's our values, and I'll take it back to Kishana now.
Thank you, Dr. Jean. Thank you so much. And it's important for us to go through those values the way you just did, Dr. Jean, as we think about who we are as Mass Women of Color Network, as we think of how we create our trainings and what information it is that we want folks to know. Today, as we think about culturally specific services, these values are grounded in that. Specifically, value number 4, lifting as we climb. That's what we named today's presentation. That value is part of a quote from Mary Churchill Terrell. And that quote goes, "And so lifting as we climb, onward and upward we go, struggling and striving, and hoping that the buds and the blossoms of our desires burst into glorious fruition everlong. And so, as you said, Dr. Jean, as we learn and we do better, we strive to pass that on and support others to do better. And so that's our hope today with culturally specific services. So about 2 years, almost 2 years now, in July 2021, and actually the year before that, because this is part 2 of the report, Mass Women of Color Network published a report called Keeping Black Women Alive, Responding to Intimate Partner High Risk in Black Communities. And in that report, we talked about many things. One thing being that Black women are dying at far greater rates compared to our white counterparts, and Black trans women. And there are many things that are happening in Black community that need to change. We need to keep each other alive. And there are many reasons for, and there are many gaps in the systems. There are many interventions that we tend to turn to or go to that aren't so effective. For example, we talk about calling the police. And although police are purposed to bring forth order and protection and safety, that historically has not always been the case with Black community. Sometimes calling the police could actually be harmful for a Black family. And so we put out 3 recommendations to the field from that report. One recommendation is to shift away from an over-reliance on law enforcement. The second recommendation is to challenge and undo the stereotypes that we hold. What that means is oftentimes, because of our upbringing, our experiences, we navigate the world with bias and stereotype. If, for example, you identify as a white cis woman and most of your team is white cis women and you're running a shelter, if a Black family comes into that shelter and maybe they're being asked certain questions, or the reactions that you give to how they answer those questions is telling. Maybe you don't feel that it's telling, but it's telling to the person. Maybe that you're racist, maybe that there's microaggressions happening, maybe that you already have a preconceived notion of who they are before they even came there. And so we're asking folks to do the work internally, do the work with your friends outside of work to undo those stereotypes that you have. And lastly, fund culturally specific services, models, and best practices. So we're going to speak to that today. After the report was published, we decided as Mass Women of Color Network that it was important to form a cohort. We didn't want this report to just sit in your inbox. We wanted this report to stay alive as we seek to keep Black women alive. And when we say keep Black women alive, we are centering that identity because they are at the highest risk. However, when we keep Black women alive, we keep Black survivors alive, and we trickle down to many of the marginalized communities. And so we created a cohort. Our cohort is comprised of 5 Black women-led organizations. We have the Center for Hope and Healing. Over there, we have Issa Wilder-Georges and Nani on our team. We have Brookview House. We have Deb Collins-Goosby, Transgender Emergency Fund, Love Life Now Foundation, and the YWCA of Central Mass. And so we meet often, and we are working to put together a toolkit. And our hope is that that toolkit will be published in 2024. It will be a toolkit that is multimedia. So there'll be some video clips, there'll be resources, there'll be active database where you can type in Black therapists and Black therapists will pop up. And the purpose of the toolkit is to center the voices of Black survivors in how we train, in how we do better, in how we provide better services. We're asking folks, actually, I'm really excited that in this month, we're meeting with people through listening sessions, one-on-one interviews, and surveys, and we're asking folks, what's working? What's not working? Where are the gaps? What has been your experience in the field at all the different organizations? And we're hoping to compile that information and put together something that will train us as a field so that we can all do better. And so In the interim of that toolkit being released in 2024, this training today serves as a teaser. So we will share some best practices and some ways of how to do it, but stay tuned for that toolkit that will really be in depth and offer so much more. So the big question for our time together today, what is culturally specific services? If this wasn't in presenter mode, I would pose that question to you, but I'm going to go ahead and answer that for us. So what is culturally specific services? Culturally specific services are created by and for specific cultural communities, with an emphasis on the voices and experiences of that community to create the best possible services for them. So these are services that are created for people in that community, by people in that community, that's saying, we believe this is how it should be done because we hold those experiences, we hold that expertise because it's our lived experience, or we have such close allyship to it that we know what we believe could be the best way to do it. For example, Massachusetts Women of Color Network. We serve women of color in the domestic and sexual violence field. So we are culturally specific in that we serve women of color. You may have an LGBTQ organization that is saying they are culturally specific because they prioritize the LGBTQ community. So forth with Portuguese speaking organizations, youth organizations that are saying, we feel like we hold expertise on how it should be done for our community. And even though Massachusetts Women of Color Network is a culturally specific organization, amongst many other organizations and programs, we still believe today that you could have culturally specific services at your mainstream organization. If that's confusing at all, I can definitely speak more to it. So we have culturally specific organizations and programs, culturally specific services that can occur within mainstream programs, right? And we're going to tell you a bit soon how to do that. I'll send it over to you, Dr. Jean.
Is my mic on? Okay, I think my mic is on. I'm somehow muted. Can I be heard?
Yes.
Great, thank you. These things always challenge me. So I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about cultural competency and cultural humility. And when I think of cultural competency, we've all taken courses, we've been in organizations where we get to go to seminars and we get training on cultural competency. These are the things that you're supposed to do to be inclusive. But we learn them and sometimes we don't get to practice them in the way we need to practice them. So for the Mass Women of Color Network, we're saying to be culturally humility, to practice cultural humility in your organization. These are some of the things that is necessary for your program to be. So your program should value diversity, and valuing diversity, meaning that recognizing that diversity has many forms, maybe 12, 13, 14, depends on who is saying in what way they're diverse. So how do we value that? We have to bring that humility to understanding that you have to tell me who you are and what you value. And we also know that we have many intersections when we think of diversity. So we can't just put people in one box in the kind of services that we're doing in one box. We are cognizant when we conduct that kind of cultural humility that we conduct self-assessment. So we start out with our goals and we try to work towards those goals, and then we return to measuring those and seeing how are we doing when we say we're culturally humility, we practice cultural humility in our organization. How is that done and how are we doing? Next thing to manage the dynamics of differences. When we think of managing dynamics of differences in a way that again is respectful, it comes from you, the person or organization that we're serving, making sure that we understand your needs and the dynamics of yourself, including recognizing who we are and how those differences sit with us. And as we're trying to be open and not judgmental about what others' needs are. We acquire and include cultural knowledge. And so that if we're a cultural humility organization, we're making sure that we are learning about how to be cultural humility, and we're practicing that in a way that people are learning and growing and making sure that this is happening for our clients and whomever we might be serving. We adapt to diversity in the cultural context of the communities that we serve. So what kind of community are we in? Are we in a community that may include the biggest population, maybe Muslims? Are they some sort of religious? Are they cultural or ethnic? Are we working with Jamaicans? Are we working with Haitians? Are we working with people from refugees? You know, who are we working with? And we want to make sure we're serving them that in a way that's humble. And so we incorporate all of those. The policies that we're making sure that they're very broad. The administration that we seek to bring in to work with people is very diverse. So when we're doing those services, we see ourselves reflected. Today, we're talking about keeping Black women alive, and Kishana and I are here as two Black females, but we're not just Black females. We have many other diversity among ourselves and between ourselves. So the service delivery that we provide needs to be culturally respectful and to what our clients need, not what we think they need, which has happened in the dominant culture for years. So many times we don't get the service. We're not satisfied with the service we receive. So in creation and ongoing maintenance of those services has to be very intentional, because a lot of times some things get started, they fall apart, they don't continue, and we feel like, oh, we were able to get this service at this place or not. When we think of shelters and places like that, who are in the shelter? Maybe this month we have women with different diverse backgrounds and we cater to those backgrounds. How do we make sure that happens? Like, I'm in a very rural place in the Berkshires. If you're African or sometimes even Latinos, or you can't get everything you need. So we have to be intentional to say to our volunteers and caseworkers, please go out and get this for this person, so that they can feel like, oh my God, I'm away from home, I'm away from everything, but I have a comfort food, or I have something that's specific to my culture. I'm seen, I'm heard, I'm important, and I belong. And that's what we're striving for when we think of cultural humility. All right, thank you. I'll pass it back on to you, Kishana.
And I feel like what I'm hearing from you, Dr. Jean, it's the cultural competency piece is like textbook. So, or what you've learned on Google, right? So you feel like you've learned all of this about a specific group. But the cultural humility piece is when, yes, you may have that as background knowledge, but you approach each situation as this is a specific person. And so I'm going to respectfully ask questions. I'm going to respectfully come to this with an open mind to care about the person. And that specific word, care, right? Care shows itself in different ways. As you were just bringing up the experience of going out and getting a specific food, if the program could offer it, do it. For example, I think of shelter with shampoo. There's often donations or products that are accessible to the guests that will come into the shelter. And sometimes it's asking someone, you know, do you see products here that you could use? And if someone says, actually, I don't use that shampoo, because as a Black woman, I may not use Dove. I may use Motions, right? And having that flexibility and that understanding, if it's possible, to try to meet those needs because you care.
Very much so. Thank you so much. Because for so long, it's been take what I give you, or take whatever service you offer, and it's not specific, or even even if you have nothing else, you need to say to the client, I see you, I know that these are not your needs, and we're going to try to make your needs. That's very different than this is what we give, and we don't have anything else. So that to bring yourself to that person's place, because when we think of diversity, we have to remember it includes age, it includes religion, it includes gender, and all the things that it's just not about race. So when we think of that, say, I bring my teenage child into shelter that was born in this country and go to school in this country, but I'm from a different country and a different culture. And so when we're working with the children, we have to be specific about what we're doing with the teenagers that are different from what we're doing with the parents.
Yeah.
All those things have to be intentional. Thanks.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And just want to add one more thing, that once you have done the work, right, and you go to create these policies and procedures to deliver this culturally specific service, you want to make sure that your procedures, your policies, your documents match what you have learned. For example, I really appreciate organizations in the past, they ask what your pronoun is, and when someone can look at the form and say, wow, they're asking my pronoun, that shows that they have some understanding. They may not know all it is about, my identity and my, best practices, but they have some understanding and they're trying. So go ahead and make sure that your documents, your policies and things reflect the learning that you have done. So why culturally specific services? And you'll see throughout the presentation, sometimes I have hyphenated culturally specific, sometimes I haven't. And that's because we see it interchangeably throughout life. But whether it be hyphenated or not, it's still important, and we still should put that work in. And so why culturally specific services? And the whole point is to improve the services that we offer. So improve the services that we offer to people across the board. And when we do so, it has benefits that stretch across community. People are more well. Communities are doing better. And this should not be seen as something so radical, something so cool, like, oh my gosh, we have now this culturally specific service. No, this needs to become a norm. This needs to be something that we see as necessity, and we need to put in the investment and the time to create culturally specific services. Why? So that we can keep marginalized communities doing well and alive. So MAWOCN, so that's Mass Women of Color Network. There's nothing that's an error about our acronym, but we'll go ahead and let that go. So what we're saying as the recommendations for engaging in culturally specific services: preliminary conversations. So that's what Dr. Jean and I have spoke to so far. Start to have these conversations within your organizations, with your staff, with your board, and start to assess where you are as an organization and where you aspire to be, right? And be honest, right? And also do this in a way that brings in and invites the voices and opinions of everyone at the table. I love circular tables because you can see everyone, and folks it's more inviting to share thoughts and opinions. So have these preliminary conversations and talk about what it would mean to offer culturally specific services. And maybe you don't aspire to create a whole program, but maybe you start by tweaking certain services so that they are culturally specific. Then you want to involve the community in defining and addressing service needs. This could be done through surveys, assessments, and asking community, what do you need, right? Because oftentimes we assume, or we feel, oh, we're the service provider. We have all of this education and we feel that this is the need. So when we go to apply for funding in the future, we're going to apply for XYZ. However, it could be more effective for you to speak with the people that you're working with. Maybe this is also through surveys. So maybe once a year you survey those that you serve and you ask them for their input. And when they give you their input, this is going to bring us down to listen. When they give you their input and thoughts on what the needs are and where the gaps are, we should listen. We should really soak in that information and sit with it. Sit with it as a staff, sit with it as individuals before we move. I also want to bring us to facilitating learning between providers and communities. So that learning could be in the form of asking the needs that I shared earlier through surveys, listening sessions. That's a great way to solicit feedback from community. Invite them, have some refreshments, and say, how can we serve you better, right? Because what are our services if they are not having input and meaning? We show up, I hope we show up to this work every day to meet the needs of people. And so sometimes we don't always know what those needs are and we have to ask. And maybe it's not just with community, but also other organizations in the communities, other culturally specific organizations in the community to say, how are things going with your program? What do you believe are the best practices at your program? What has been working? What I have found really cool in the past was when organizations invited, or I was invited, and we also invited others to come to our staff meeting. We have a staff meeting on Wednesdays. Come and share about your organization. Bring some brochures and talk with us about the services you provide. Let us know how we can get connected with you if we want to make a referral. So talk to other service providers and build those relationships. We're going to talk about building relationships soon. But this is very important and needed as we hope to bridge the gap and as we hope to become resourceful so that we can better serve those that we serve. Being transparent is super important. For example, when you're having those conversations with your staff, if you're saying, you know what, we want to start creating, we want to create a Spanish speaking program, right? We're going to be culturally specific in the language of Spanish. You have to be transparent and say, do you actually have the infrastructure to do that, right? Looking at your budget for the year or the next year, do you have enough within the budget to hire staff that speak Spanish, and not just one staff, but maybe more than one, such as 2, 3? Do you have money within the program in the budget to create an account with the language line in the meantime as you work to become more culturally specific? So really being honest and transparent about what you can do. And also transparent about where you lack, right? Maybe you're like, you know what? We need more training. Let's slow things down and spend this next year training and developing ourselves as an organization so that when we do have these conversations about culturally specific services, we feel more equipped to do the right thing. Also undo the bias. So this I spoke to when I gave the example of the white cis women in the shelter and their engagement with a Black family. So undo the bias, and that's work that's ongoing. Allyship is ongoing and it's active. I really love how folks explain active allyship of getting up each morning and putting it on, right? And deciding that you're going to be an active ally today. Yesterday's allyship does not work for today, right? So how do we make sure that each day we are committing to the values of caring for one another? And also fostering a culture within your organization that welcomes culturally specific programming. That means, do you actually listen to your staff? Does your staff feel comfortable to share maybe things that are more challenging to share? Do you find that you are good at accountability? So when you do mess up, do you say to your staff, actually, that was an error on my behalf, and do the work to correct that? So undoing the bias and also fostering a culture that welcomes culturally specific programs. Then you really want to be intentional about hiring and training the staff that will be at the forefront of these culturally specific programs. What we've seen in the last few years is an uptick in increased funding for culturally specific programs. Lots of funders are saying, we want to fund culturally specific. We want to fund BIPOC leadership, right? And so when you read these applications, right, and you think of, I want to go after this funding, I encourage us to kind of pause and say, are we going to go after this funding just to have more money? Or are we going to go after this funding to have more money and do a great job, right? And so if that means the latter, then you want to hire and train with intention. So if it's, for example, the Spanish speaking program, if you want to hire staff that speak Spanish, you shouldn't hire one. I think you should hire at least two, because those individuals will have the support, not just from yourself, but also they will be able to support each other. And then I encourage us that we build relationships with other culturally specific organizations so that we can collaborate. So maybe it's also reaching out to a Spanish specific organization and say, we're thinking of hiring 2 Spanish speaking staff. Do you have anyone there that could offer clinical supervision in Spanish, right? And then compensating those programs for that collaboration, so that you're being mindful of, I'm not just going to hire this BIPOC staff, but I'm going to do the work so that they feel supported when they get to this organization and that they have the tools that they need to thrive, to succeed. We want to set BIPOC up. We want to set culturally specific staff up for success. And next, create respectful and meaningful relationships with culturally specific programs. So that is now, not when you need it, when the funding comes available and you see the grant application. No, start to think about it now. Who in your area, who in the Massachusetts area is doing culturally specific work? It could be youth culturally specific, LGBTQ culturally specific, language culturally specific, identity culturally specific, and start to build those relationships. Start to invite conversation and hear, what are these incredible organizations doing? And then hear how you can support them, how you can potentially collaborate with them in the future, so that when these opportunities for collaboration and for subcontracting arise, you already have the relationship built, right? So you want to start to think now, how do we create respectful and meaningful relationships? I also included respectful. That is a huge part of it, because culturally specific organizations are often bombarded, right? So for example, an LGBTQ organization, I'll share the network LATED, right? We may say, oh, anytime we have a survivor come through our doors and they identify as queer, for example, we are going to send them to the network LATED, which is like, no, that's not what we should do. We should potentially consider that the network LATED, yes, they're culturally specific, but they may be bombarded. They may have a wait list. So how can we be respectful of their capacity, of their time, of their expertise, and how can we bridge the gap? Maybe we have a phone call and we ask questions so that our organization can actually try our best and do our best to serve this person. And I think about that even with interpretation. We oftentimes go to the organization, and we should, but in moderation, everything in balance, right? So approach these conversations with respect. And another important component of respect is proper compensation. So if you have money within your budget to compensate culturally specific organizations for their work, right? For their interpretation, for their info session of sharing with you how the policy you created needs to be edited, then compensate them for that, if possible. And that brings me to creating respectful and meaningful subcontracts. So subcontracts, what that means is, let's say you and your organization, you're going after a grant. And the grant is saying they're going to give such and such amount of dollars to do these things and you're creating a program. A subcontract is when you bring on another organization as your partner. So maybe you're the main grantee or the main contracting organization, but you're bringing on another organization to say, we're going to collaborate and we're going to work together. That's a subcontract. And so when you do respectful and meaningful subcontracting, I think that looks like you read the application for the grant, you hear all of these wonderful things they want to fund before you even start to create your application and put together this wonderful proposal and put the subcontracting organization in there. You should meet with them. You should meet with them and let them know what it is that you are hoping to collaborate on. Say, this wonderful grant has come to be, and we're wondering about a collaboration with you. Is this something you're interested in? Is this something you have capacity for? And also, what are your ideas? I think that the program could look like this, and we could subcontract in these ways. What do you think, right? And really bringing them in from the beginning and asking their thoughts from the beginning, getting their permission from the beginning, and then go ahead and creating together. Not going ahead and filling out this wonderful grant application. You've added in this culturally specific program as your subcontract, but they have no clue. And you're hoping that when you get the funds, you're going to call them and hope that they say yes, right? That's not the way to do it. So you want to have respectful and meaningful relationships with programs throughout community. You want to do this ahead of time, and you want to be thoughtful in your subcontracting. And also have this prioritized structure and orderliness in culturally specific services. This point is really important because I'll use mainstream organizations as an example. Mainstream organizations, they may have 5 services that are their go-to services. They've been doing it for 20 years. Wonderful. So they have taken the time to really flush out those policies and procedures. The structure is seamless, it's wonderful, it's orderly, right? And then they say, oh, we're gonna bring on a culturally specific service, and it's disorganized. It's like a back burner addition, right? And so we wanna make sure that we take the time to flush those programs out and have them be as beautiful as the rest of our programs. And knowing that it's a learning process, right? So it may not be the best product right at the beginning, but knowing that you have given it its proper time and attention. I know I've just shared a lot, so I'm going to encourage us for 2 more deep breaths before we go into the next slide. And I also need one. All right. So as we continue with recommendations for how to engage in culturally specific services, slow and steady. I love the quote, slow and steady wins the race. I think that's so true. Sometimes we have to slow things down and we have to be intentional to create something good. My grandmom, I love her. She, throughout my childhood, she would often say, haste makes waste, right? You hurry up and you do something and you didn't do it well, right? So we want to do things slow and steady. Take your time, do your research, have these preliminary conversations, meet with other programs, make rough drafts, look through your rough drafts, maybe do a pilot phase where you're trying it out. So slow and steady. Do away with or explain the jargon and acronyms. So going back to power sharing, going back to welcoming everyone in your staff at the table and welcoming folks to the conversation. Also, when we're talking with community members and those that we serve, we want to do away with the jargon as much as possible. So, for example, there may be, we're talking, we're having a conversation. I'm like, yep, MOVA said such and such and such. I know who MOVA is. Some people in the conversation may know who MOVA is, but maybe someone who just entered the field 6 months ago doesn't know. So we want to go ahead and pause and share what the acronym for MOVA means and who MOVA is. They are a funder in Massachusetts. So we want to let folks know what the jargon and the acronyms mean, because that's how we bring people in. That's how people gain trust. And that's how we do things that's more inclusive. Be respectful of the complexities in culture and language interpretation. So that may mean everything that you've learned, the competency, right? The cultural competency. In practice, the cultural humility in practice means that there's so much that you still don't know. And because things are complicated, right? And we all live at many intersections. And so take your time to make room for the complexities and give yourself room to have energy and space to interact with complexities. We want to empower others. I want to speak to the example of the subcontracting for the grant. The main contracting organization, the primary organization, may feel like, nope, this is the program that we think would be great to create. Empowering others is when you invite the subcontracting organization into the conversation and say, this is what we think. What do you think, right? So that gives them an opportunity to co-create and to feel like they have some say-so in what maybe could happen. And that also increases buy-in. It increases ownership when we allow others to be empowered, feel empowered. We want to be open to criticism, feedback, and input. For example, you may create this beautiful policy. However, when you share that policy with your staff or with your board, or let's say the policy is in its third draft and you want to share it with another culturally specific organization, be open to the fact that you think it's great and they feel like it's not so great, right? And so when if folks say, actually, this is not spot on, be open to hearing that and also asking why, right? Not feeling like, oh, I've done the work, this is great, but no, I want to create the best culturally specific service for those I serve. So how can this be better? You know, I use Google Translation and it told me that the Spanish should be translated this way. But if you're telling me actually that makes no sense, then I want to hear what how does the Spanish speaking community say this slogan, right? And really being open to that feedback and input. Lastly, you want to be accountable. So be accountable from beginning to end. Be accountable to being honest about where you are, being honest in preliminary conversations. Be accountable if you're ever told that you didn't do something correctly. Be accountable when you say something or you mess up and someone calls you on it, right? Be accountable if you all publish something and it's actually harmful to those that you're seeking to serve. Be accountable and be willing to do better. Be willing to be honest, right? And then resources for support. So when you're creating culturally specific services, there are many resources. Those within the org, those are a resource. Your board, they should be a resource. The community that you're seeking to serve, they're a resource. Google's a resource. Reading is a resource. All of these resources. So you want to seek out those resources and use them all. Honesty, I've spoken to before. We want to solicit recommendations. This for me means, for example, the JDI, the Jane Doe listserv. I really appreciate when I see on there, folks are like, hey, I'm serving a Portuguese speaking survivor. Do you know of any Portuguese speaking support groups? So solicit recommendations from community, right? And then lastly, continue to check in at the beginning, check in right after that, check in next week, check in after you've given a service, say, how did it go? What can we do better, right? Because we are always learning and our programs should always be evolving.
Okay, thank you, Kishana. I'll take another breath here. That's a lot of information. And this is so, I hope you're taking it all in as something that could be so useful for you eventually, each organization or even each person who's listening right now. And it sounds like a lot more work when we think of what we're doing, but we're in this together. So when we think of like how slowly we have to build what we need to build. I mean, I think about that and I think about attachments. You know, when you quickly do something with someone, it's like a reactive attachment. But when over time, when you work together and you build that trust and you build that consistency, you have a secure attachment. So eventually you can do more and you can be authentic and you can get a lot more done for yourself, your organization, and your community. So I also wanted to say to engage community as much as you can. Sometimes we feel like we might not get volunteers for something, but you'd be surprised who is in your community, retired people, people who just have the time to spare that may want to help out in trying to build a diverse sort of services that will serve people better. And so I just want to go through some of the skills that we may need to get that done in a way that would be effective. So when we think about the skill set, we think about the things that we need to grow, think about the ability, do we have that available for us? We have people with experience, or how do we get that experience? Learning, again, is very important. And through listening, we learn and is able to help others get their needs met. Another value is around knowledge, that the more we know, knowledge is power. As Kishana was saying earlier, when we throw in acronyms around and assume that everyone knows it, they don't feel powerful. They're sitting there saying, I'm missing information. So that we need to break that down in different ways, because a lot of times we're dealing with, when we deal with diversity, we're dealing with a lot of like immigrants and people who don't know everything that we know already. And we have to think about competence. And competence, again, as we were saying today, it looks kind of like what we learn, and humility is about what we do, how we practice. And that's very important. And last but not least, advancing our learning. So at this point, I want to make a plug that I am co-chair on the Technical and Training Assistant program at Mass Women of Color Network. And we're putting together the toolkit that should be coming out next year. And we're hoping to be out there helping, training you, getting you comfortable and feeling competent to do, and with humility to do what you need to do to really just bring this alive. So yeah, we're looking forward to that. So that's great. So I'll just turn it back again to Kishana.
Thank you, Dr. G. So we've done a lot of talking. So we're gonna, as we wrap things up, this is actually our last slide. We're gonna play this video. I really love this video. It says, the wisdom of geese, right? And so I wanna encourage us that we should be smart like geese. So give me a moment as I transition us over to this video.
Monzo.com makes GANs great again. Yeah, you know what? I'm not going to say again because they never were, and they're complicated. See, with Monzo.com, making a Gantt chart is as simple as throwing your...
Great leaders don't set out to be a leader. They set out to make a difference. It's never about the role, always about the goal. Here's the 7 lessons we can learn from the geese. Number 1, sharing a common goal. As each goose flaps its wings, it creates uplift and aerodynamics orientation that reduces air friction for the birds that follow. By flying in a V formation, the whole flock achieves a 70% greater flying range than if each bird flew alone. Lesson: people who share a common direction and goal can get where they are going quicker and with less effort because they benefit from the momentum of the group moving around them. Make sure your team is aligned towards a common goal. Number 2, increasing visibility. Flying in a V formation increases the visibility as every goose can see what's happening in front of them. The lesson here is to make our organizations visible in both org chart directions. Having top-down visibility enables leaders to stay connected with the edges of the organization to make better informed decisions. Bottom-up visibility enables teams to see the bigger picture, engages them, and empowers them to better align themselves with the organizational objectives. If we have as much sense as a goose, we will stay in formation, joining those heading in the direction we want to go. The sense of community emerges with a willingness to work as a team. Not only is it more efficient, the flock together has better visibility of its surroundings and is more visible as a collective. Number 3, having humility to seek help. When a goose falls out of formation, it suddenly feels the friction of flying alone. It then quickly adjusts its mistake and moves back into the formation to take advantage of the lifting power of the bird immediately in front of it. Lesson: be humble to admit the challenges we face and to seek help as soon as we get stuck. This humility will enable you and your team to move faster and achieve more. If we have the sense of a goose, we will openly and confidently acknowledge when we need help and gratefully accept the support that is offered, and will fly harder to stay up with the flock so we can all go longer distances with ease. Number 4, empowering others to lead. When the lead goose in the front gets tired, it rotates back into the formation and allows another goose to take the leadership position. Lesson: empower others to also lead. Micromanaging and keeping tight control will burn you out. It will also disengage and demotivate others around you. People have unique skills, capabilities, and gifts to offer. Give them autonomy, trust, and a chance to shine, and you will be surprised with the outcomes. Number 5, always recognizing great work. The geese honk to recognize each other and encourage those up front to keep up their speed. Lesson: make sure we praise people and give them the recognition they deserve. Lack of recognition is one of the main reasons team members are unsatisfied at work and quit. It's very common for people's efforts to go unnoticed by their peers in a busy and fast-moving work environment. However, remembering to constantly provide recognition and encouragement is vital, and it keeps teams motivated to achieve their goals. Number 6, offering support in challenging times. When a goose gets sick or wounded, 2 geese drop out of the formation and follow it down to help and protect it. They stay with it until it dies or is able to fly again. Then, they launch out with another formation or catch up with the flock. Lesson: standing by each other in difficult times. It's easy to always be part of winning teams, but when things get difficult and people are facing challenges, that's when your teammates need you the most. If we have the sense of a goose, we will stand by each other when things get rough, and we will willingly take the support and guidance that's an offer. Number 7, staying committed to core values and purpose. The geese migration routes never vary. They use the same route year after year. Even when the flock members change, the young learn the route from their parents. In the spring, they will go back to the spot where they were born. Lesson: stay true to our core values and purpose. Strategies, tactics, and products may change in order for an organization to remain agile, but great companies always stick to their core purpose and values and preserve them with vigor. If we have the sense of a goose, we will recover and regroup and resume formation with the greater team headed in the direction that we want to go, and we will stick with the plan until we succeed. Thanks for watching this video. Share and subscribe for more amazing.
One moment. All right, y'all. So that video, that motivational video was super powerful. And I love it for many reasons. The analogy of the geese and everything that we can learn from them. For myself, what's really standing out to me is when he talked about the geese supporting one another in the line, right? That the friction of the geese flying in that formation helps to lift the entire flock. when he also talked about how we should empower others to lead, right? So when you feel as though you're getting tired, when leadership is getting tired, and even before getting tired, right? Allowing yourself to rotate that formation and allowing someone else in the team to take a more leadership role, to take on some responsibility and try things on, right? Because that's how we're gonna learn. That's how others learn, is when they have opportunity and when they feel like they have autonomy to try it, right? And if they try it and they don't do so well, being sure that there is not repercussions or punishment for that, but there's encouragement and there's coaching. And lastly, I really love how he talked about that there won't always be wonderful times. There will be some challenging times. And when challenging times do arise, we need to support each other as a team. In this example, when one geese is injured and it needs to go down for a rest, there's 2 geese that accompany it, right? And stay with it until things are better. So that video was really encouraging for myself. I hope it was also encouraging for you. So again, thank you for your time today. Mass Women of Color Network, we really appreciate your intentionality. Because you showed up to this webinar, we know, or you should know, that because you showed up that you do care and that you do want to gain knowledge and information to do better. So we wish you all the best as you think about culturally specific services, as you strive to create culturally specific services, as you strive to improve your culturally specific services. And as we've been mentioning, our Keeping Black Survivors Alive Toolkit will be coming at the end of 2024. You will hear so much more about it in between now and then. This training served as a teaser as we wait for that release. My name is Kishana Smith, she, her pronouns. My contact information is there on the screen. That is my phone number and also my email. Feel free to reach out with any questions, thoughts, concerns, anything you may want to talk about regarding culturally specific services, and also how you can get connected to Mass Women of Color Network. Again, Massachusetts Women of Color Network, we support the leadership and sustainment of women of color working in the domestic and sexual violence field. So if you know someone who may self-identify as a woman of color, who's maybe not already connected to us, please send them our way. They can simply send me an email and say that they're interested, and I will begin that conversation with them. We serve cis women of color, we serve trans women of color, and we serve non-binary people who are comfortable in spaces that center women of color. I want to do one shameless plug before we go. As we are in our first year of 501c3, we have our first ever annual fundraiser coming up. It's called 13 Reasons to Celebrate. That will be happening on June 22nd from 6:30 p.m. to, I believe, 10:30 or 11 in the Seaport. I'm going to drop a link in the chat for how you can support us. We're looking for auction items. We're looking for nominations of women of color. We're also looking for sponsorship, and also just buy a ticket and come, right? So I will drop that in the chat. And again, thank you for your time. We're going to take questions now.
Thank you so much, Kishana and Dr. Jean. This was really an incredible presentation. I learned so much. We do have a couple of questions. The first one being from Birch House, located out of Arlington. They're wondering how they'll be able to access that toolkit once it becomes available end of 2024.
Yes, so the toolkit will be available in many forms. One way is that we'll be publishing it, right? So folks will have it. Actually, I don't want to speak to that because we are still working out those details. And I believe we did say that we want to start being compensated financially for our training and technical assistance. So although it will be published and ready to go, I think we'll be asking for folks to sign up with us to come out and do the training. And once you receive the training from us and you've paid for that service, then you will have the toolkit at your own leisure.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Another question we got, do you have any tips to rebuild trust when we have made mistakes and have caused harm? thinking about this in terms of within an organization.
Absolutely. So tips for rebuilding trust. Most times when trust is broken, people want acknowledgement that harm was caused, acknowledgement, not in a vague sense, but even more specifically on acknowledgement of what the harm was, right? Sometimes people want to know that you know how and why they feel harmed or they feel offended. So making acknowledgement, I think, is really important. If it's leadership, if it's harm to a specific survivor or harm to a specific person, maybe it's a one-on-one meeting. If it's harm to that affected a group, maybe it's bringing it back to that group setting and having those conversations in the group to say, we acknowledge that such and such was done. And we genuinely understand that it was harmful because of X, Y, and Z. So also letting people know that you understand why it's a behavior that should not happen again. And also share with folks a genuine apology. I'm sorry. Or this was an oversight on my behalf, or I did this and, so acknowledgement, apology, and also talk about how you're going to do better in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I'm not seeing any other questions, but we have a whole lot of appreciation going on in the chat, and I will echo that. Thank you both, Kishana and Dr. Jean, for being here with us today and sharing all of the Mass Women of Color Network's values with us and helping us learn more about how we can incorporate these values into our day-to-day work and work together to both engage with and prioritize culturally specific services in this work. We really, really appreciate you both being here. And I'm not seeing anything else in the chat, like I said, but I do want to remind everyone that this recording will be distributed as well as Kishana's contact information. So if you do have any other questions that arise, please do feel free to reach out. And thank you both so much again for being here with us today.
Yes.
You're quite welcome.
Yes. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and thanks for hosting us, MOVA.
Absolutely.
Yes, for caring enough for community to provide this training. You're on the right track.
Thank you so much. And thank you to our ASL interpreters and CART captioner who are here with us today as well. We appreciate you all.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Have a great day.
You too.
Alrighty, bye-bye.